Hello, how are you today? Welcome. My name is Cheryl Howard, and today I like to continue our discussions that we've had on camera settings and incorporating that in some of your creative photography, creative editing, and coming up with your own creative designs in your photography. So let's get the slide up. See if we can get that moved up. Okay, so we have kind of talked about some of these in the past, the different camera modes. We've talked about some of that. We talked about shutter speed and aperture. So we just want to kind of continue on with those discussions. And moving from um, automatic in your camera setting to manual settings, that can be kind of daunting and that can be a little bit scary. But kind of take the leap just a little bit at a time, go from the completely auto to making some of the adjustments in shutter speed and aperture. So the truth is that shooting in auto mode kind of sacrifices some of the flexibility and control that you have in your camera. So, if at all possible, try to avoid total auto mode if you can. And your shutter priority or shutter speed, that allows you to alter the shutter speed while the camera controls are just the aperture. And as we said before, aperture priority is just the opposite. You control the aperture and the camera adjusts or controls the shutter speed. And so that's a good way to get started. That's how I got off of the auto mode is I started shooting in aperture priority, and that gives me a lot more control and a lot more flexibility. And that's even given me the courage to go in some settings to completely auto where I set everything myself. But that takes time and takes some getting used to get to that point. So you want to become familiar with your camera and all of the camera settings so that you can go from that auto to manual mode. And then setting your ISO. That's probably one of the misunderstood settings in the camera. Um, but the ISO, adjusting your ISO can either brighten or darken your image. So you want to, again, become familiar with, raising the ISO values. And what does that mean? In some settings, in some situations, if you raise it too high, that can introduce noise into the picture, as we mentioned in the past. So uh, know your surroundings and know what you're going for, and when you're um, taking pictures in the different settings. So you want to maintain as much control in your image as you can. And then metering modes. That's in camera metering mode. It determines the appropriate amount of exposure or light that's introduced into the picture. And different cameras have different settings, so you want to get your manual out and become familiar with the different metering settings. Matrix metering is useful in situations with evenly distributed tones. Spot metering is ideal for metering in high contrast scenarios. So you want to experiment with those different metering modes. And by doing that, that can lead to greater creativity and technical control in your images. Another important setting, as we talked about in the past, is white balance. Different white balances. And you can use white balance in a creative way, but also you want to make sure that you have the proper white balance for the situation. You don't want to have it too blown out or too dark, and then that's going to entail more post processing to get the image just the way you want it. You can also look at your manual and see you can set your camera for custom white balance settings. But again, become familiar with your manual and your camera, and try out some of the custom or presets for white balance before you go out, so you have an idea what that's going to look like once you get out there. Let's see what's next. Manual focus. As beginners, we want to achieve those sharp images, but sometimes that can be a challenge. So you want to make sure that you have autofocus. That can be a quick way to and relatively easy in shooting in manual focus. Sometimes the difference between successful and unsuccessful images can be the manual focus or autofocus. It's much more effective, manual focus is, than autofocus, especially in low light and low contrast conditions. Let's see what's next is composition. So we want to make sure that we have all the visual elements within the artwork when we're shooting the image for our composition. So you want to experiment with that. Make sure that you don't have a tree that's coming out of the back of someone's head. Make sure you have, you survey the scene. Make sure everything's just the way you want it when you're composing the image. Sometimes just turn it around or just get in a different perspective um, in your scene, uh, obeying the rule of thirds and looking for those leading lines. And so, just again, the visual aspects of the scene, taking a look around, surveying the scene, again, making sure I've had so many pictures with trees and trash cans because I didn't pay attention to the scene. So, those things are very important. Next, we want to talk about abstraction. Wikipedia defines abstract photography as a means of depicting a visual image that does not have an immediate association with the object world and that has been created through the use of photographic equipment, processes, or materials. So basically, abstract photographers generate subject matter that prioritizes aesthetic experience over conventional discernibility. So, abstraction is a unique facet of photography in that it encourages a more experiential approach to photography. By taking advantage of the abstraction, those starting out in digital photography are free to experiment beyond the conventional notion of a photograph. This experimentation will eventually inform other areas of a new photographer's practice, building experience and developing individual perspectives. So you create your own world, and that leads to a lot of interpretation and a lot of unique photography. So give it a try. Um, and then post processing. What are you going to use once you take those pictures? Uh, if you don't get it right straight out of the camera. So if it doesn't come out right in camera, which is ideal, we need some type of post processing. And so, me personally, I use a lot of um, Photoshop and Lightroom. Those are my go tos in editing my digital images. There are a lot of free applications out there, such as GIMP. Um, and if you have, some of your, there are apps that you can get on your phone that are free that can help you with post processing images. But take a look around. There's On One, as I mentioned, Photoshop, which is an Adobe product, and Corel, that's out there too. So, um, ideally, we all want to have those perfect pictures coming right out of the camera, but that's not always possible. So, we need some type of post processing tool to make those pictures look even more fabulous than they are when we took them. So, hope this was helpful. Just wanted to kind of explore and go over some of the terms and that we have talked about in the past. So I try to look for interesting and insightful articles that can not only help you, but help me improve my skills as well. So, again, I'd like to thank you for stopping by, and I will hopefully have something interesting for you the next time you stop by. So until next time, thanks again, and thank you for watching. Bye bye.